All right, this is Mrs. Hall, and this is our last lesson in the cognition unit entitled Decision Making. When we're talking about decision making, we're talking about evaluating alternatives and making choices among them. A lot of times we do this haphazardly without any systematic reasoning. For example, should I bring my umbrella or not? Can I trust this person? Should I shoot or pass the basketball? We're making decisions all the time. Should I say this or should I filter it? But the theory of bounded rationality, this is our tendency to use simple decision-making strategies that focus only on a few facets of available options. Because we don't focus on the big picture of everything and we make very simple decisions, very quick decisions, they're often irrational, that are not always the best decisions. And they give it this great big name for it, the theory of bounded rationality. But basically all it is that we don't critically think through a decision before we make it. All right, in the last lesson we talked about heuristics, which were mental shortcuts. Well, now I've got two different types of heuristics for you. The first one is called the Representativeness Heuristic. This is judging the likelihood of things in terms of how well they seem to represent or how well they match up to particular prototypes that we have in our mind. Because of this, it can lead us to ignore other relevant information. This representativeness heuristic allows us to make snap judgments that are based on our beliefs, but ignore other relevant information. For example, a stranger tells you about a person who's short, slim, and likes to read poetry, and then asks you to guess whether this person is more likely to be a professor of classics at an Ivy League university or a truck driver. Most people, and you as well, probably said Ivy League professor, ignoring the fact that there are far fewer professors than truck drivers. We have a lot more truck drivers in the world than we have Ivy League professors. When we do the math, the probability is higher that this person who's short, slim, and likes to read poetry is a truck driver than an Ivy League professor. But because that description matches up to our prototype of an Ivy League professor or a professor at all, we tend to think that first. When we make comparisons to our mental representation of a category, it tends to override our other considerations like logic and statistics if they match up with it, just like I just showed with the Ivy League professor. The conjunction fallacy is a sub-concept of the representativeness heuristic, and this is the idea that we estimate the odds of two uncertain events happening together as greater than the odds of them happening alone. So based on the representativeness heuristic, we would say that a person is in a smaller group than a large group. Again, I'm going to give you the example of the Ivy League professor. If we asked this man who's short, slim, and likes to read poetry, if he was an Ivy League professor or an Ivy League English professor, the conjunction fallacy fall prey to the conjunction fallacy, and we'd often say an Ivy League English professor because of the poetry aspect. Same thing here, probability. There are much fewer English professors in the Ivy League than there are Ivy League professors as a whole. So estimating the odds of two uncertain events happening together than happening alone. Another sub-concept of the representativeness heuristic is the alternative outcomes effect. This is the belief about whether an outcome will occur, and that outcome changes depending on how the alternative outcomes are distributed, even though the probability of both outcomes is the same. Now, I'm sorry, I did look for an example of this, and the best one is in your textbook. So if you have your textbook, stop the recording right now and go to page 238 and look at that hurricane map on 238, and you see the different percentages, and read the caption that goes along next to it, and it gives a really good example. It's the one I usually show in class under the document camera, and I looked for it online. I couldn't find this picture. The other one to look at is the featured study on page 327. If you read that, then it gives you another example of the alternative outcomes effect. The second type of heuristic that we use when we're making decisions is the availability heuristic. This is our estimation of the likelihood of events occurring based on their availability in our memory. How readily do these instances come to mind? If they come readily to mind, we presume them to be as more common than they really are. The faster we remember an instance of some event, the more we expect it to happen again. For example, if someone has broken a promise to you, okay, We can tend to think that, let's just say girls, let's just say a boy has broken his promise to us. What can happen then if you encounter another boy who gives you a promise, you're more likely to think that he's not going to keep his promise because boys break their promises. We start to generalize. Let me ask you a question. Do you think there are more words in the English language that have the letter K as the first letter or the third letter? According to the availability heuristic, we usually think of the first letter, but in reality, it's the third letter. It's harder to think of words that have a K as the third letter, like make, like, likely, ask. Words like kind, keep, those come more readily to mind, and so we start to think that that would be the answer. In casinos, they are huge on using the availability heuristic. Small wins are signaled with bells and whistles. If you've ever been in a casino, which I'm not recommending this, but if you've ever been in a casino, somebody wins, I don't know, they just win a little bit, $5 or something, and you get bells and whistles and everything all over the place, making them vividly memorable. You remember winning. You remember that they make a big deal about it. And big losses are soundlessly invisible. You don't even hear anything about big losses. So we tend to remember the big wins more. So do people win or lose more at the casino? Well, we know they lose more. But a lot of times, if we've been through that, we think that people win more at the casinos because that's what we see. We see all the excitement, and that's what we remember. Salesmen will do this to us as well. I'm just going to use, for an example, an insurance salesman. They're going to try to get us to either recall or to visualize events that would benefit buying their product. So if we're talking about insurance, in Muskegon, we really don't need flood insurance. Yet, it gives the salesman more commission if he sells us flood insurance. So he's going to give us these examples of ways that our basements could flood. Think about all the snow that we have and it seeps into the ground. Or what if your kid leaves, the hose on and it seeps into the ground and it floods your basement? You're going to want that flood insurance. Yeah, but what's the probability of that really happening? And the availability heuristic can also affect our social judgments as well. School shootings, violence in schools. It comes readily to mind because the news makes such a big deal about it. And they are a big deal, but the number of school shootings that occur in a year are not that much. Selecting alternatives. Now, this is usually based on preference. When you need to make a decision, you want to buy a new car, you need to decide which college you're going to go to. There are different strategies, different ways that we can select the alternatives. This first one is called the additive strategy. We list all the attributes that influence the decision that we're trying to make. Okay? So if we're talking about a car, we're going to list all the options, all the attributes that we want in our car, or that are available in a car, and then we're going to rate the desirability of each option. How much do we really need this thing in the car? So what are we looking for? So we can go with pros and cons. Okay, what's the gas mileage? Does it have, automatic windows? Does it have four-wheel drive? Is it blue? Is it red? Whatever kind of a thing, but you list the pros and cons. We tend to use this one more with decisions that have fewer options. You could do this even with going to college, but I would probably move on to the next one. This one's going to be a real simple one, just listing the pros and cons. The second one is elimination by aspects. We eliminate alternatives by evaluating them on each attribute. I would probably use this one more when buying a car. I would look at those things that I mentioned and look at, what is more important to me, the gas mileage or the fact that it's the color red, the four-wheel drive or the gas mileage, depending on what I'm going to be doing. So we evaluate more in this type of a selecting alternatives strategy. The final one is delaying decisions, and I cannot give you any better advice about decision making. Those companies or those places that want you to make a snap decision, that won't give you the same option 24 hours from now, you probably should question whether or not it's a good idea to make that purchase. Okay? If that company really wants your business, they'll give you the sale or the price that they're offering you right now. They'll give that to you tomorrow as well. My husband and I, we have a few different little rules with our decision making in our family. Number one, we don't ever make a decision by ourselves for a big purchase. We always make it together. Even if it involves, him buying a motorcycle that I'm never going to ride or have anything to do with, we still make that decision together because it's a big financial decision. The second one, and this is the bigger one, is that we don't ever make the decision right there on the spot. We always go home and come back the next day. When we bought our van, for example, and even Jeff's truck, when we bought our van, though, I remember they did not want us to leave that store. Okay, we were at the Honda dealership and they did not want us to leave. We were out in Grand Rapids and we said, I'm sorry, we don't make decisions the day of. This is the first time we've seen this van. It's the first time that we have driven it. The first time we've talked to you about it. We will come back tomorrow if it's something that we decide that we want. Well, we can't promise that it'll be there. Somebody might come in, and we're thinking to ourselves, you know what? If somebody comes in and buys that van, then it wasn't meant for us in the first place. So delay your decisions. Seek more information. The information that you're seeking, though, it doesn't usually alter your decision. You're just looking to make sure that you're getting the best deal that you can. So it's just the idea of waiting. Don't make that snap decision because you're not quite sure whether or not it's the best one. One last example, not to promote Disney, but when we purchased our Disney Vacation Club, okay, that's where we have our timeshare down at Disney World. That's how we're able to go down as much as we do, and we save a lot of money. We had to pay a lot of money up front, but now we don't pay anything when we go down to Florida for our lodging, and we stay in really nice places. Here's what Disney did, and we really respected them for doing this. We had to pay a down payment before we left if we wanted to purchase the vacation club. So we made the down payment, but then they said, you have 2 weeks from now, so go home, look over all this paperwork. You have 2 weeks to change your mind, and we will refund you 100% your down payment. If you decide that it's not for you, that's fine. We don't want you putting your money into something and spending all this money and it not being for you. We would rather you decline the offer. We'll give you your money back and wait until it's the right time for you. So we found that to be a huge selling point for us, that they would give us that 2 weeks to make that decision, because they realize we're down there, we're excited, we're having fun at Disney World, it looks really good, and now we get home and we're like, holy camoli, what did we just do? I mean, this doesn't work with our finances at all. Just a couple of words of wisdom for you. And decision making is not an easy thing. Think about, where you're going to go to college. It's not an easy decision. Take some of these pieces of advice and make that decision with a clear mind and feel confident in the decision that you're making. All right, that does it for our cognition unit. Test will be coming up, and I will see you then.